Time now for our focus segment. Officially, mutineers fired first and the French army retaliated. I'm talking about the deaths in 1944 of 35 Senegalese tirailleurs, soldiers from France's West African colonies. During World War II, many were imprisoned here in France by the Germans, but when they were sent home again, French soldiers opened fire on a group of them. France 24 reporters met with a historian who's been trying to find out if it really was due to a mutiny or just a massacre.
After 4 years in a slave labour camp, it was finally time for them to board a ship headed for Senegal. Before leaving on November 5, 1944, the French army handed the 1,000 African tirailleurs gathered at the port of Morlaix in the west of France a quarter of their entitlement as former captives. Officials promised the rest would be paid upon arrival, but by the time they reached the Thiaroye transit camp nearly a month later, the terms of the agreement had changed. The Senegalese soldiers complained and refused to leave the camp.
On a débarqué à un port, Morlaix, embarqué Morlaix pour venir de Dakar. Arrivé à Dakar, on nous amène directement à Thiaroye. C'est là-bas que les Français ont tiré sur nous.
Shots were indeed fired around 9:30 on the morning of December 1st. The French army had surrounded the camp and gathered the men in the courtyard before opening fire. 35 of the Senegalese soldiers were killed, another 35 injured. 34 of them would eventually be sentenced to between 1 and 10 years in prison on charges of rebellion and contempt.
The French officers regarded this as an act of rebellion and disobedience. In their eyes, it was clear they had the obligation to show the world that these rebels were going to fall back in line as subjects of the colonial empire. So a show of force was called for. The official version states it was the mutineers who fired first and the army retaliated.
Armel Mabon has sifted through the archives in Dakar and Paris to try and understand what actually happened that day. For this former high-ranking officer, her work leaves little room for doubt.
When reading these documents, it's clear that there were no weapons stored in the barracks. It's a travesty. Here, we're dealing with people gathered in an open space and who are shot at, people who can't defend themselves. It's a massacre, not a mutiny.
Mabon dug out a series of official army reports. One, by a General Dagnan, brushes aside the soldiers' financial demands. The Salmon report provides a detailed chronology of events, except for the exact moment when the shots were fired. As for the Le Masson report, it brings proof of the premeditated character of the shooting.
We all know what suppress means in military jargon. It means to take out, to get rid of. So from this very moment, we're talking about a deliberate decision.
So this means that at 6:45 a.m. a military intervention had already been planned with armoured cars, with machine guns. So it was not the result of mutinous soldiers firing shots at 8:45 or 9 a.m, nor was it because the officers got scared the men would get violent. No, this means this had been planned in advance.
Yves' father, Antoine Abibou, was accused of leading the mutiny and sentenced to 10 years in jail. The letters sent by his family and supporters failed to convince authorities to spare him detention.
Mr. Governor, I'm writing this letter seeking your kind attention. I'm only a modest worker and I don't know if I'll be able to make myself clear. In Rennes, I was acquainted to a Senegalese called Antoine Abibou. On December 1st, 1944, he was arrested in Dakar and thrown in jail in Thiès, where he still is. Therefore, Mr. Governor, I hereby come to humbly ask you, as a reward for his courage and dedication to France, which he loves so much, if it is in your power to grant him clemency. If you need signatures, I can send you as many as you want as to testify in his favor. My respects. I was shown the trial documents. My father was really dragged through the mud. But from what we know today, he was speaking the truth. And the more I dig into this, the worse it gets. Now I really need to get to the bottom of this. That France, just as it's done in other cases, recognizes this was a state crime, so that his dignity is restored, so that these things get repaired.
President Hollande was the first to ever mention the Thiaroye massacre back in October 2012 in Dakar.
La part d'ombre de notre histoire, c'est aussi la répression sanglante qui, en 1944, au camp de Thiaroye, provoqua la mort de 35 soldats africains qui s'étaient pourtant battus pour la France.
70 years on, doubts remain over the official death toll, and some still deny the bloody shooting ever took place. While the French Justice Ministry is contemplating a trial to reconsider the evidence, Paris vowed to return the archives to Senegal.